Boys and ghouls, welcome back to another frightening episode of Movie Reel. I'm your host, Kevin Tracy.
I'm Samantha Tomlinson.
That's right, we're back again to talk more about various vampire movies throughout the entire month of October. This week, we decided to do an actual horror movie for this, so I was actually very excited. We're doing 30 Days a Night, a movie that made vampires scary again. Sam, what was your kind of first initial reaction to us doing this movie?
Well, I mean, I had never heard of it, and then at least I don't think I've heard of it. And then you sent me the trailer, kind of told me the plot, like basically a small town Alaska where the sun sets for about a month, and it's based on a real place where,
Yeah, Barrow,
which
Alaska for
apparently in real life it actually sets for more than 30 days.
yeah, it's about 65 days
Yeah,
between the months of November and December,
yeah.
but I mean
But
30 days a night just
yeah,
sounds way cooler.
but the sun sets, and so this small town is basically ravaged by vampires who can hunt there because sunlight
There's
doesn't.
no
Yeah.
sun. Yeah.
And I kind of like the premise, and the trailer and your reaction were make because, like, again, I'm not a necessarily a horror person, so I went into it very unsure, and I kind of loved it. And
All right, it's older.
I realized this is the same thing happened last year with Black Christmas. You thought it was going to be the one that I was going to like the least, and then it was my favorite one we did. And I feel like, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun watching it. I guess the reason you were concerned is because there's a lot of head explosions from bullets, or heads being decapitated, people being decapitated. There's a lot of that stuff.
There's a lot of gratuitous violence, but I mean it's not really gratuitous. It makes sense
Yeah.
in the situation and for the pacing of the story. But I feel like at times it can get a bit much, and since I don't really know what your threshold is for stuff like that, I was very cautious, I want to say, by sending you okay, here's a video that kind of goes a little bit more behind the scenes on what to expect for the movie. like I knew that it would kind of spoil some things for you, but at that
Yeah.
same time it's I also know that I need you to watch this movie so we can do the podcast.
I watched it after, and I'm glad I did, because I think you said it'll help you with some of the points in the movie. So I was thinking more like the
Yeah.
story elements, which it
Well, I mean, it definitely
yeah,
it
but
does
it's
kind of help
more of
a little bit, but we'll get it. Yeah, we'll get into that
it
later.
it definitely yeah, we'll talk about it in a second, but it more so spends its time kind of talking about how the movie was made and the various special effects they used for all the gratuitous violence.
Yes.
But yeah, I overall really enjoyed it. I started watching, I don't know why, so if anyone's interested in watching this, it's on Hulu, but on IMDb it says it was on Pluto TV, which is where I first went, and I actually watched it with my friend Miles, who's actually the godfather of Movie Reel, he, or the grandfather or producer, whatever you want to call it. We were just texting each other while we were watching it, and he, I guess, had seen it a long time ago. So he was like, "So what are you watching it on?" I'm like, "Pluto TV," which is what it said on IMDb, and then he's like, "I mean, it's on Hulu." I'm like, "Why was Pluto TV the first one that showed up on IMDb?" And then when I started watching it, I'm like, there were commercials. So I quickly am like, nope. And I just went to Hulu. But it's on Hulu and Pluto TV if you're interested. But yeah.
Yeah, I just ended up because I remember watching this around the time it came out and really liking it, so I just ended up just buying the whole the thing on Amazon. I just bought the Blu-ray.
So it was originally, what was it? It was originally a
comic,
and then they struggled to find a publisher, and then he tried to sell it as a screenplay, and then eventually it became a comic.
Yeah, it eventually became a comic first in, oh god, when did it come out?
I want to say it was 90s or 2000s, early 2000s maybe.
Yeah, something
Movie's
like
2000
that.
from 2007. So
Yeah. But yeah, no, I actually do remember like around the time this movie came out in like 2007, it had like this huge like resurgence of the comic. And I remember getting my hands on like the first issue, and I actually rediscovered that after we agreed to do this. And I reread the first issue of it, and it is amazing how much of the source material they were able to directly translate into this movie, which is kind of amazing to think about that they like for the most part like they did add like a few characters from what I've seen, and like they changed like a couple of things like the dynamic between like Stella and
Hmm.
Eben is a bit different in the comics than it is in the movie. Like in the movie they're like in the middle of like separation, and this one they're just like a happy married couple, and they're also both cops in the comic, whereas in this one Stella's like a fire marshal and he's a cop.
I mean, it's still law
um
enforcement, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they work relatively in the same field, but it's also kind of amazing how well it translated from the comic to the screen, and how uh much information that they were able to get from like the first few issues, because they've had like multiple different like series and like iterations of this. They've had a crossover with X-Files. I think they had a crossover with Ash and Evil Dead at
Why
one
X
point.
Files? It just
It
seems
just
so
it
random.
spiraled so much. Yeah, it is, but I mean it's comics. You have like crossovers with
Oh,
everyone, so
okay.
that's kind of par for the
Okay.
course. um but reading the first issue, it's like 22 pages, and that almost like covers like the first 30 minutes of the movie. Like it is amazing how much they were able to get from like the first issue of
Is
this.
yeah.
Like it covers from like the beginning of the movie all the way up to like them discovering like Gus's head and the radio station getting completely
Isn't
destroyed.
it?
It's like that is that is a lot of information
Yeah.
for one comic, but it flowed really well and smoothly, and yeah, I was blown away by how much they
Isn't
were
it
able to get.
satisfying when a book, what whatever, original source material is made into like it's actually like the adaptation actually really stuck with the source material. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
and I
yeah, that's one of the reasons why I really like this movie is just how much they were able to stick with the source
and yeah,
material, because it is almost like page per page and shot like line for line in some
yeah.
spots.
Um, I I when I watched that video that you sent, so it's called Exploring 30 Days of Night. It's on YouTube, and it is really interesting. And
Yeah,
they're basically, in a nutshell, they made it clear like the director got to make the movie he wanted to make, which is like
yeah. The movie that came out is
which
essentially the
is
director's cut.
fantastic. And I remember thinking, in the first thing I thought was, do you remember like the most recent like Fantastic Four, like the night before that came out, the director went on
Oh, Fantastic Four
yeah,
stick.
the director went on
Yep.
Twitter and just basically said like, I'm so sorry, this was not the movie I wanted to make. And the fact that he knew it was gonna suck and was trying to disassociate himself with it before it even came out is such a like that is just that's kind of almost heartbreaking. So it kind of made me think,
It's also
oh,
kind
I
of a
mean, yeah,
power
like
move.
it's like, you guys messed with my movie, so why should I, like I get it, but I got to say when I heard that this movie is what he wanted to make, I was like, because in the video they say like that's actually very rare for Hollywood. It's like that's upsetting. But
Yeah,
yeah, and even like I saw like the images, like the design of the vampires is straight from the comic. It They really went above and beyond trying to be faithful to the comic, and there were I guess I haven't read the comic obviously, but there are, from what I understand, it sounds like there's
yeah.
a lot of really good things in the comic and they brought it to life.
Yeah, I actually recently rediscovered this. So, if you want to get a hold of like the comic, there's you can at least get like the first issue for free if you have an Amazon
Hmm.
Prime account. They have a separate thing called Comixology, which used to be its own thing. Then Amazon bought it, and it's basically just this online um like comic browser that you can just read wherever, as long as you have like internet access, like if you have the app. And I was able to rediscover like my account through that, and had 30 Days a Night on there because it was free, and just reread it the other night and was just like, wow, this is really good. This still holds up. And along with like a bunch of other stuff that I had on there from like 8 years ago. This was like comics that I read in like middle school, early high school, and I like completely forgot about this account until I rediscovered that this was a comic from watching like all the videos talking about this movie. It's like, wait, I remember reading this.
So okay, so you have read the comic.
I have read the first. I've read like the first few issues. I can't find the other ones, but I
Hmm.
do. I remember like the first one the most, mainly because I just reread it for this video. I really wish I could find the other ones, but I do remember it following more or less the exact same story with like there were like a couple things that I vaguely remember that kind of like uh were like vaguely different from the comic. I might be because I've read like some from like a different series, like Darkest Day or something
Hmm.
like that. Like it was like a couple different like series that all expanded in like the same universe. So I don't fully remember. So I'm not gonna quote remember what I read
Yeah.
way back when,
Yeah.
because it's probably gonna be wildly inaccurate.
So let's get into the plot. We kind of mentioned, but basically, it's a small town up in Alaska. It's like the
Yeah.
tip of
Barrow,
it's like the tip of
Alaska.
Alaska. It's like they say the top of the world. And the sun's about to set for about a month, and our main so our the characters are so Eben, which I kind of so Eben is his name in the comic. I'm guessing, obviously, not guessing. I'm
Yes.
assuming because like
Yeah.
because
Evan and Stella are the main
because I
characters.
keep because sometimes it sounds like they're saying Evan, and I'm like, no, it's Evan. Like, and I'm like, why
I know.
Evan?
I,
Yeah,
I had to put on subtitles because I was hearing that as
I
well.
put on subtitles for
Um,
a little bit. Not I think I had it on from the beginning, and then I think I was able to I took him off. But basically, he is like the sheriff of this town, and so is Billy. Billy is also a sheriff
he's like his
deputy or
partner,
whatever.
I
Okay,
guess. Yeah,
so
yeah,
and then they're kind of getting ready. The whole town's getting ready. A lot of people are leaving because they don't no one wants to. I can't even imagine living somewhere where you don't see the sun for I mean, even one day, I'd be like
yeah.
I can't even imagine. So the fact that you
Well,
don't see, and
they like they yeah, that like, and I remember like they even mentioned like it's like, oh yeah, like during this time like alcohol is illegal. Like people have a hard time enough as it is without throwing alcohol in the mix with everything going on. It's like that's a really good point. Like I
that
never
is,
really
yeah,
thought about it. Like watching this like as like a middle schooler, like I didn't think about like the psychological impact of not seeing the sun for a month. Like what does that do to you as a person? Like I'm because everyone more or less kind of like associates like, oh, it's like it's daytime when the sun's out and it's time for me to be productive, and when there's no sun, like is everyone just like I figured like people would just kind of go in like waves of like being like super lethargic
hmm
and not really wanting to do anything because your mind thinks that it's night, it's time to go to bed, it's not time to be active or do all this stuff, even though it's 8 o'clock in the morning or whatever. It's just I never really thought about
yeah.
the actual impact of being in a town that's perpetually in a month of night.
It's like being on a cruise in a room on a cruise that hasn't doesn't have windows. Is my only comparison.
Yes.
'Cause I remember I went on a cruise and we didn't have any windows in our room, and I would wake up and I thought it was like 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning, but it's like 8 or 9. But like, there's no windows. I have no way to tell. But yeah, so there's Evan and Billy, and then
Yeah. Also, I just want to point out the actor who plays Billy, Manu Bennett, uh, who I mostly know as uh, uh, oh shit, Deathstroke from the Arrow series. I swear, has like the whitest teeth I have ever seen. It was
Wait
kind
a
of
minute.
distracting in the
Wait a minute.
movie.
First of all, yes, Miles and I were commenting on that too, but also, wait. Just so I'm like, which one is Deathstroke again? I feel like I'm pretty sure I know who it
Uh,
is.
he has the eye
Oh my
patch.
god,
He
that's
kind of
him!
look.
Oh, I didn't even.
Yeah,
Oh
that's
my god,
him. He was also Crixus in the Spartacus show on Stars a few years
oh my
ago.
god, I didn't. That's funny because so the one of the other characters we meet, Bo, the guy with the plow.
Yeah, Bo.
I thought
Yeah.
he looked so familiar, and then when I looked it up, he was on Mandalorian. He's the guy that hooks up Mando with
Yeah.
the prison break episode. But
Yes, and he's also the shitty detective in Batman Begins that he like hangs upside down by like the grappling hook and does the whole like where were the other drugs going, like that whole
I
interrogation
don't remember
scene.
that, but okay. I saw he was in Batman Begins. But anyway,
Anyway,
oh my god, his death. Oh my god, holy shit.
yeah, you
No,
didn't
I did
realize that,
not. I
and
think it's because he didn't
yeah,
look so strikingly familiar to me. Actually, it's funny. So this Evan is played by Josh Hartnett, who he's done. I guess he was in. I haven't seen it. I want to now. There was like a movie a couple years before this, the Black Dahlia, about the Black Dahlia killer. That he was in. He was like a detective, I want to say. Um, and he's done like I guess apparently he did a lot of big studio movies and then kind of got stopped and started doing more indie projects and they really wanted him for this role and like sent him the script and all that. But I thought I had to look up because he looked really familiar to me. He looked to me a lot like Matt Lanter.
that name doesn't really ring a bell to me.
He's voice of Anakin, I guess.
Oh, in the Clone Wars.
Yeah,
Oh,
he
okay,
looks
that's
like
cool.
that. He looks like the actor a little bit. He has the faces are similar, but I'm like, I know it's not. But then his voice also sounded a little bit like him, so that was throwing me for a minute. But anyway, yeah, we're kind of starting to meet people in this town, and then he works. So obviously, being the sheriff, I guess we meet his brother, Jake.
Yeah, who's like 15 and is
How old
just
is
like
Evan supposed to be? Like, I would say like late 20s or 30s. And
I yeah, I'd say like 30s or
so,
something like
where
that.
are the parents? Are they dead? I don't think they really mention them, but we meet their grandma, Helen, who, I mean, spoiler, she dies pretty quick. Um,
Yeah,
and yeah,
I mean we don't see it, but I mean
no,
like yeah, it's who
and
boy.
then we meet so Stella, who they're kind of they don't. I don't want to get into it now. I thought overall, I did think there were some. While I really enjoyed this movie, I did think there were some narrative issues, and I feel like I need to
Their
watch it.
separation was one of them.
It really just doesn't really go into a lot of detail on why it kind of it gets mentioned randomly,
It
and
it only it only re- actually hold on. There was one thing that kind of annoyed me about like their whole separation thing is that literally everyone that they meet throughout this entire like opening act is everyone is asking is like, so why are you and Stella getting separated? Like everyone is asking is like, mind your own
yeah,
business.
it's a small
Like you nosy
town. They
fucker.
got nothing else
Yeah,
going
it's
on.
like
Yeah,
I know, but I mean like you nosy fucker. Like
yeah,
that's none of your business. It's like,
yeah.
geez, like oh yeah, you can like at one point like Stella's like oh she had like misses her like flight or whatever and she can't get to Anchorage so she's like going to like stay with like Billy and like his wife and his daughters. It's like oh yeah you can like shack up with like Penelope and the girls and then you can tell us what's up with you and Evans like what the fuck.
Like everybody just really. I think it's because she doesn't seem so. She's obviously from there because she is technically married to Evan, but we
Yeah,
don't. It kind of at first seemed like maybe she wanted to get out of this town. Maybe she like wants something else, and then
yeah,
really
like the only indication that I remember them saying that like they want to have a separation is that like one sentence is she like kind of mentions like one of them not wanting to have a
I
kid
think it was
or
him
vice
that didn't
versa.
want to have kids,
Yeah,
and it's like okay, but also it was just in the very beginning, like, okay, so she's driving to the airport, and I'm assuming because when she misses her flight and she's like, I'm stuck here for a month, I'm assuming it's like a small plane, and that pilot is not gonna want to fly at night. I'm
Yeah,
guessing because I'm like
like
planes fly at night, but I'm assuming it's a tiny little charter
yeah,
plane.
yeah, it's not a 747,
Yeah,
Sam. It's like a
yeah,
small little
yeah.
like
But anyway, she's like she calls and asks Evan if he can give her a ride because what's his name? Is it Malachi? He's just someone in town, random
yeah, just
person in town.
some random yokel hits her with a snowplow. That a character that we never see or
Yeah,
hear mention of again.
and she calls and asks Evan if he can give her a ride, and he's like, "Oh, I got to go do something. I'll send Billy." Or she's like, "We can take this time and we can talk." Because he wants, I guess, to it kind of sounds like he wanted to talk and work things out. Maybe I don't know, maybe at some level they both wanted to talk and work things out, but he's like, no, why don't we talk when you actually want to talk? Like he knew like she
Yeah,
was only okay, however much time they have from, the drive to the airport is either not enough, but also just for the sake of luring him, hey, why don't you come take me so we can talk? It's like, I get being like,
yeah,
that's no, we have to have an actual talk, not a we're driving on the
yeah,
way. Like, I get that. And he's kind of just, it
yeah,
sounded like in the beginning, the way they were talking and just the way everyone was asking, it sounded more like it was they're having an issue and she's the one that's leaving. So maybe the issue
to
is more
avoid it.
yeah, so maybe the issue is more something she's dealing with or he wants her back, but whatever. It sounded like something I feel like we've all
Yeah,
heard before. And then very randomly it gets mentioned that he doesn't want kids. And I don't want to jump to the end quite yet, but I felt that obviously it was very much building up towards them like kissing or getting back together, and the whole movie Miles keeps texting me going, God, just kiss already. God, just kiss already. and I meant this not necessarily okay, I said it's like an M. Night Shyamalan movie, and I didn't mean it as like because it sucked. I meant because um isn't that like a trope in his movies of like
there's always a
there's a
twist.
no twist of like isn't I mean maybe it's just in The Happening, I don't know, but I thought that was like a trope of his of having like a married couple or some kind of couple that reconcile at the end.
I don't watch enough
Okay, so
M Night
I don't either.
Shyamalan
I think I
to
heard that
know.
somewhere, but I don't. Okay,
All right.
anyway.
So so
Anyway.
so their marital problems aside, so while all that's going on, Evan and Billy are investigating a lot of like really weird shit that's been going on in town. So in the very beginning of this movie, we just see some random guy walking on this in the snow, getting onto the beach from a random boat, and you see like this huge like oil tanker basically like way off in the distance. It's like, oh, that seems like super ominous. And this guy, who's credited as the stranger, who's played by Ben Foster, um, is just trudging along in the snow, and he comes across Barrow, Alaska, after walking for who knows how long.
What? Whoa!
And
Oh, okay. I have to
yeah,
go
and
back.
then
I have to go back because I for a second, like for the first few minutes, and then we hung up. We were Miles and I were just texting, but like we were
did
on
you
the
just
phone.
miss like the first 10 minutes of this
No, I
movie?
was no the it was first of all the few minutes, not the first 10. Anyway, no, we were talking. I was watching. I thought that the guy walking in the snow and then sees the sun. Wait, the very first scene before the boat. I thought that was Evan.
No, that was the stranger.
Wait, not the stranger dies.
This is in the beginning of the movie, Sam.
Oh, oh right. Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm confused on how you're confused by
No,
this
no,
now.
no.
What the
Okay,
fuck?
no. I thought it was Evan, and to me,
Why did you think that was Eben?
well, he was wearing this like a similar kind of jacket, and he had the beard. So I
Everyone
wait.
was wearing that
Okay, yes,
jacket.
but still,
What?
I thought it was the end of the movie. Like, no, not the end. I thought it was like it was jumping. It just was jumping to the very end. He's seeing the sun, and then we're gonna see the
That
next
makes
month.
no sense that you've seen the end of the movie. That
No,
makes no
like
sense.
no. That's what you've seen movies where the first scene is something from the ending or something leading up to the end, and then we go to the beginning. Then we actually start over.
But
So that's what I thought it
but
was. I
Sam,
thought
the beginning of the movie. But hold on. the beginning of the movie is in daytime. The movie ends with him dying in the daylight because he turns into a vampire. How does that make any sense?
Oh my god, you're not listening. See, that was the thing. Well, why didn't because I thought that was him and I thought like, oh, he's going to be maybe he's the lone survivor and he's like hiking and he sees the sun, like he survived the month. And then we jump back to like the beginning of the month. This is what happened.
No,
The whole movie's in
no,
flashback.
because
I thought the whole movie
it
was a
literally goes.
flashback and then when he what I didn't want to jump to the ending, but okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, he like literally it, like the next thing that happens is the stranger like walks into the dog kennels and just massacres all the dogs
Well, we
there.
don't. Do
Like
we
it,
know that's him? We just see somebody. It's pretty brutal. We see. To me, that was the most like, oh my god, moment of the movie. Which it's not, but for me, it was like you just see a bunch
yeah,
of
it was pretty brutal.
these bunches of huskies, and you just see someone with a knife like killing them, and and then
And
later, Evan is like asked to, hey, can you come check this out?
yeah,
Somebody killed our dogs.
after him and Billy investigated a reported quote unquote vandalism, they just find like a fire pit with like pretty much like everyone's like satellite phones just burned in a pit, and then they go and investigate the dogs. Then they find in like this uh uh like refinery plant they have like this huge like
The
grinder
Muffin
thing
Monster.
that yeah, the muffin monster is what they call it.
When I saw that, I'm like, oh,
They
someone's gonna die by that.
Oh,
You know, like
100%. 100%. I'd be disappointed if they never
I
use
thought
that.
for a second they
But
weren't
yeah,
going to, and I'm like, really? They're not you? And then I think literally a few seats later it showed up again. I was like, oh, okay.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, yeah, they investigate that and it's like, oh yeah, like the entire like parts from like the only helicopter in town are like thrown in there. Like the thing's completely trashed. So it's like they have no way to like call for help. They have no way to like really get out of there except for like their cars, which after a while, like there's no road, so that's out of commission. There's no like boats to evacuate like everyone in mass.
Yeah.
There's probably like a couple like rowboats, and now there's no helicopters. So it's like okay, this is starting to get really weird. And then they find the stranger asking for like whiskey, but alcohol is illegal
And
now, so
raw
they're not giving
meat,
him that. And yeah, raw hamburger meat in a
which
bowl,
apparently
and
he was supposed to be.
straight from the
He was supposed to be
comic.
kind of a nod. His character was supposed to be kind of a nod to Renfield in Dracula.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. He pretty much says that he's doing all of this because they are going to turn him. Like he's basically doing all of this under the impression that they're going to turn him into a vampire and give him eternal life. And um, you know,
like Jackie.
pretty good
Yeah.
compensation for doing that. Yeah.
Um. Yeah.
And then the nail in the coffin for this town is when it does eventually become night. They're like one like radio station that pretty much like moves like all communications like in and out of town. Um, who's run by like one guy, I forget his name. I want to say like Gabe or something like that. Um, gets completely trashed by like the group of vampires led by a elder vampire by the name
Do
of
they say his name
Marlowe
ever in the movie?
in the comics, but no, not in
Because
the
I
movie.
know
He's credited as Marlowe, but they never
because I
say
know
his
all
name.
of the vampires have names, but so the vampires, we so like we're seeing like okay, so at first I thought like why would they get rid of everybody's phone? Why would they kill dogs? Like, and then it becomes clear, oh, the stranger's doing this to cut them all off so no one can leave because they're sled dogs and like phones, like so they're
Yep.
doing everything they can to keep them from leaving. And then when where like the first guy, like the old man, what was his name? He dies first, and then
It's like yeah, like
Gabe is the second
yeah,
one.
he's the one who's like he's like running like the radio
And
station.
Eben is very like I mean I get him being shocked and upset, and obviously this is a small town, he knows everybody, but like they never, unless I blinked and missed it, I don't think they really ever did. They ever have a scene together? It just seemed weird for him to be so
No,
choked up about someone that, and we never. It's important
well,
enough. It's important enough that we
no
don't.
he was kind of like choked up as like one like I've known this guy because I know everyone in this town, and two, I'm freaking the fuck out because this man isn't just dead; his head is on a spike. That is not
I
normal. That is like
no, I
death cult.
know, but
Like,
like,
what the fuck is
but
going
I
on?
was okay. Okay, so it's more about how he died. That's fair because I was just kind of like, I can believe obviously that they know each other, but I find it weird that they don't interact at all. And I'm assuming it's because other than the guy's job, he's not that important to the story. But he dies, and then what was it? So Gabe and then like two other people, and what were they? Were they all just gonna go hang out, or are they gonna have a threesome? Like I was really like, what's going on with you guys?
I don't know. Just kind of like two horny guys who work on like on a Alaskan pipeline. Like of like it's whatever. Like they just get completely like jumped
And
by
what
the
was the
vampires
girl's
because
name?
it's now
What was
nighttime.
the
What?
girl's name? It was two. It was Gabe, other guy, and girl. What was?
Uh,
Okay, anyway, it's okay.
oh,
We only
I
know
don't
it's
know.
Gabe because they go
Yeah.
Gabe. He just gets like he's
Oh,
Denise.
Denise.
Okay, he's
Denise.
there, and then he's just like he's just gone, and they're like Gabe, and then we see like we kind of see like the vampires starting to come out, but then we cut away. It really you kind of get like a little bit of a silhouette. You understand roughly what they look like, but the movie really like bides its time in showing like fully showing the vampires. And I actually really I genuinely like I will say okay, these vampires are completely different than anything I've ever seen or like a stereotype that I'm familiar with
Yeah.
because well first of all one of the first attacks a vampire is like jumps thrown into like the window through the window into someone's house and
Yeah, and it's the couple who owned like
yeah,
all the
and
sled
I'm like,
dogs.
okay, so I guess they can go into they don't have to be invited in. And yeah,
Yeah, this isn't like yeah.
and I was waiting. No, but yeah, I was like, okay, and then I was waiting like the whole time. I'm like, are they eventually going to use like wooden stakes on them? I was waiting for all of the tropes and things I know about
The
yeah,
stereotypes.
things I know about vampires and none of them nothing other than they can't go out in the sun. Nothing was like that was seen in the movie. And the design for them like they have like these really like big like deep kind of noses. Think of like and then like they're it's like they have a human body but their faces and their faces and their eyes in particular their eyes were black and they were supposed to kind of look like I think the word was other like outer was it otherworldly like or outerworldly like they're supposed to look kind of like demons.
Yeah, yeah, like I really like the design for these guys. Like, and it's very like similar to the comics. Like, this comics have like this very kind of like black and white kind of stencil kind of drawing, kind
Mm-hmm.
of like dark shading to it, which is kind of cool. It kind of reminds me of like some like kind of like offshoot like Tim Burton kind of vibes,
Mm-hmm.
like really dark, really macabre, really dreary. Um, and in the movie they hold as probably true to that as you could possibly get. Like all the vampires are very pale, like very like almost gray looking skin. Like you don't the only color that you see on them that isn't like gray, white, or black is just blood red, and that is just so strikingly
Yeah.
vivid and visceral when you see it like plastered like all over their faces. it is it's so scary looking, and they do have like these like really long like claws. They're super strong, they're super fast. These things are like they're an apex predator in this. They're not just some like cliche like I want to suck your blood
Yeah.
kind of thing. Like these things are they're pack hunters. They attack in coordinated, deliberate strikes. The only times they kind of go buck wild is when, all right, well, there's literally nothing to stop us, and then they have like this whole massacre in town like 2 days into it, and then it's just slow, systematic going through the houses and hunting the rest of the people
Yeah.
down. And it's so scary to think like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense. If vampires existed in real life, this is 100% like what would happen. And then they try to like cover it up and make it seem like it was an accident. Like they busted like the oil line and flooded the entire town and tried burning the
which
entire
which
town
is like
down. It's like
incredibly like crafty and smart.
that is
Like
that is so well thought out. Like how long did they
which that's
plan
the thing is
this?
that's
Like
what I am
yeah.
like curious like okay, so the stranger is basically sent in to kind of scout it out and I'm assuming
Yep.
maybe the stranger informed them or somehow they knew, but they sent him to go scout it out, make sure no one can leave, and they kind of realize once they like, you know, once they start seeing oil like seeping through the town, they realize they're gonna burn it down, and then they're gonna just so like it never happened, like the town doesn't exist, and then they can just move on to other nearby towns and do the same thing.
Yeah, they were saying it's like, oh yeah, like what's gonna stop them from like hitting like Anchorage next or something
Um,
like that.
I think it was like well, Anchorage is pretty big. I feel like that would go noticed. But yeah, no, like I get what you mean. But
I
and yes,
mean, they do
they mentioned
specifically
Anchorage a
mention
couple, but I think
Anchorage.
it was
That's
Wainwright was the town that they
yeah,
said a couple of times, and there was some other random town. But
yeah,
anyway, yeah, the once you kind of realize these are not stereotypical vampires, they and like I said, they have like the body of a human, but their faces and their eyes, they are not just like they're more. It's like they're just like wild animals, and it's so that's what made it so creepy and scary. Like, and I think, and they don't even like speak English. They have this weird like shrieking, like they do this weird creepy shriek, and they have this weird
yeah, like
They've had this their own language, and apparently they created a whole new language for this, and it was like they had like a language expert. I can't
a linguist, yeah, a linguist. Yes, they
linguistic
had
expert to help
yeah,
them. Um, and it's but it kind of I couldn't get over their design just because I was thinking like I was just kind of blown away by it because it's like they can just walk into houses. They can like just the only their only limit is the sun. And when they take that away.
yeah,
But I think it was like I couldn't get help to think like even Nosferatu had more human like qualities than these ones.
yeah. That
And
like
he
that's
and
saying
they had the
something.
same creepy
Um,
long nails that he had, but they had their faces were scary in other ways.
yeah, but I mean, like they weren't like all like they could still like pass as human. Like Marlowe, like
Yeah.
it's just Danny Houston. It was just the bad guy from Wonder Woman, just way more paler. Like
What happened, buddy? Yeah.
that's who he
Yeah.
was. Yeah. It's just like they're all just like really pale. Like they're just they don't really have like the only thing that's like really striking about them that they can't really hide is instead of just having like two like fangs like that you associate with like literally every vampire, they have like a bunch of like razor sharp like shark teeth. They just they don't bite like a vein and suck your blood out of your neck. They rip your throat out and then they just slurp on what's coming out. It
One
is
one of yeah.
yeah, it's disgusting, but also is like no, that makes sense. Like that, like there's no way that you could actually get like pinpoint precision every time you would get like from like an evolutionary standpoint. Like that doesn't make sense because not everyone's like veins or arteries are kind of like
Mhm.
the same. I mean, like
Yeah.
arteries are kind of the same, but I mean, like everyone's like veins are different, so like it makes sense to have like a bigger like area of effect to
It's
consume your
been a
meal.
really long time, but I I thought the design of the vampires, mainly because of their eyes, their teeth, and I think their noses, they looked like the evil aliens from I Am Number 4, if you remember what they look like.
I I think I saw
Yeah.
that movie once and it was like this. I I didn't like it, but it's like yeah, I don't. I
I
barely
mean, okay,
remember
they
that
kind
movie.
of they similar. I felt like their teeth really were what like they had a similar design as the aliens, which is I was like, oh yeah, but yeah, it's been a long time since I've seen the movie too. But anyway, I but that actually yeah, talking about like them just ripping everyone's throats out. I think definitely one of the best scenes in this movie, which we definitely got to talk about just the way this was shot in a second. But the best, I think one of the best damn scenes in the
Yeah.
movie was it's like an overhead shot, like a drone shot of just vampires
Yes.
just
Yeah. I know.
massacring this
Yeah.
town, and just you're seeing all these various attacks. Blood is covering the. It's I'm supposed to be grossed out and like scared, but I was like, oh my god, it was like almost mesmerizing. It, like
Yeah. It was also crazy because like the town they basically built like several buildings. They basically built like Main Street of like all these like makeshift town like buildings and like homes and stuff, and they used that as basically like a model, and then they gave it to Weta Pictures to extend the town for like all the shots where you see like multiple like buildings from like you see it from like a mountain and it just kind of like goes on for a while. And they did basically the same thing with that drone shot to widen the street and like add in like a bunch of people. Like there were a few like extras in that scene, but I think like there were either like a few people in that scene or there were like no people in that scene. So everyone you're seeing is just a CGI character model running around like shooting a shotgun trying to defend themselves or getting their
there's a
throat
lot of I
slashed.
know there's a lot of a lot of things that were done in post, but it looks really good. I feel
Yeah,
like.
yeah. This movie aged very well for
Oh,
2007 movie.
it looks really really good.
Yeah, like there were a couple things. Like the one thing that I thought probably looked the hokiest was during like the final fight, like the killing blow during the final fight. I think that was the only really hokey thing was when Eben basically like Marlowe is like trying to kill Eben and they're basically just like fighting it out to see determine like who's going to be like top dog to get the vampires out of this town or not. Like Eben more or less challenges Eben because Eben killed like Marlowe's like mate, basically. Like they very much
Oh, the
act like
girl.
yeah, they very much act like wolves. Like they have like an alpha, he has like a mate, and then like everyone all like follows like the alpha's lead. Like everyone kind of like like huddles around him, just like, oh, if he says it's okay then it's okay, like let's do this. And like even when like they know Eben's in like Helen's house when he's like trying to get like the UV lights to see if that'll work against them, like his mate is like, and like a couple of the others are like like they're like they run up a few steps and then they turn around, like Marlowe hasn't said anything, it's like, can we go in, can we go in? And then he finally signals, and then they bust down the door and and then hell breaks loose. But during like the final fight, uh when Marlowe is like about to tackle Eben and like basically try and kill him because like Eben's got like his hands broken, his like face is all torn up, like he's basically gotten the shit kicked out of him. So like Marlowe's like in like mid tackle, and Eben just punches through his mouth and out the back of his skull, and that's probably like the hokiest thing in the movie, just on how that looked. But it's just like, oh no, that's cool. I'll take
See,
it.
I thought I thought the only time something looked genuinely like kind of shitty to me was not really even shitty. It just didn't. It looked very fake to me. Was this? I want to say it was the scene where so basically, and we'll talk about it more in a second. But basically, after the vampires, and they don't really know what they are. They don't really know that they're vampires.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
they're having that argument of like vampires aren't real. It's like, well, then what the hell are they?
but they're basically hiding out in someone's house who has like an attic with the stairs go in, the stairs retract and go into the attic so the
Yeah,
vampires can't get in there. And they're basically all like, however many people are still left in town and are alive are all huddled together, and they throughout the movie are moving to other places or go to the general store when they need it, like but there's a scene where Eben, I don't remember why, but he's out, and one of the guy who owned the sled dogs, his wife
yeah.
was killed.
Who? Yeah,
Yeah.
whose wife just got like murked like
And that
immediately.
scene's crazy. Like the vampire jumps in and she's being dragged under the house and he's going in after her and like pulling her and like, but obviously she's gonna die and he he's underneath he's underneath his house and Emin's like, how long have you been down there? He's like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, well he's a vampire because he would have freezed to death. Like there's no way he would have survived. And
It's
then
like that.
he is a vampire.
He wasn't there the entire time. I don't
Okay,
think,
okay, but
because by that point it's like day 7.
okay, yes,
Like
but like
I don't think he's been under there for a week.
okay, but as far as we know, I'm like, either way, he doesn't have a coat on. Like, how is, there isn't a lot of evidence to support how he would have possibly survived. But anyway, regardless, um, I think Evan realizes he's become a vampire, um, and ends up having to kill him. And I think just it kind of just pans out, and you can see this wide shot of the scene like after. And I think this the backdrop. It just looked very fake, like obviously a green screen. And I know that a lot of those kind of scenes, a lot of the scenes where there was they needed a lot of snow. Anything that they needed to control was inside, but I thought
Yeah.
that scene, like the backdrop, just to me looked very fake. Like it didn't
Okay.
look real.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
Um, but yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like most of the special
Yeah,
effects in
because
this movie hold up pretty well.
yeah, and like another thing that kind of blew my mind was like kind of like watching like some like the behind the scenes of it is that all the snow is fake.
Hmm.
Like there's like a lot of the times they filmed on like a controlled set or in like a studio where they basically built like a miniature like a model of that house so they could do like a lot of the interior shots, which there were actually quite a few sets if that's what they did, which is very impressive because there's like 5 or 6 like indoor locations that they're working with, and they're all somewhat pretty elaborate
Yeah,
and very believable looking. Like but anyway, like every time they're like outside or like walking around, um, they either filmed like on location or in a controlled environment where is pretty much where they did like the finale where they burned down like a bunch of the buildings and whatnot. But yeah, all the snow is fake. They
it's like
just put
salt
like
and
yeah. They put like they painted like the ground white, put like plaster, and then were spraying like yeah like salt and like foam, like a bunch of like fake snow everywhere, and it was just like that's really impressive. Like I legit thought that they filmed this in like some like wintry like I thought they filmed this in like Canada or something to get like some of the B-roll shots or at least or something like
it
that.
was in Alaska though,
Which kind of
right?
blew my mind.
Alaska
Yeah,
or indoor in a studio. Yeah. Um,
yeah.
so we should talk about kind of go back to the story a little bit. So we kind of said how they're they're all huddled together and in an attic in very like they're trying so hard to it I think for me this movie it didn't come off to me as a horror. It came off more as a survival movie, which is still a great pitch
I mean,
for a vampire movie.
survival horror
Yes.
is like an extremely popular like subgenre of horror, like
No, I know, and
Resident Evil. Yeah,
we've talked about this how like horror bleeds into almost every single genre. And in this it kind of reminded me a little bit of A Quiet Place in the sense of everyone has to be kind of methodical. It's not just they're not trying to figure out necessarily what these things are. They're not trying to figure out like what's the best way to kill them, or it's not like a more supernatural-esque vampire story. It's really vampires are ravaging this town. We have to band together until the sun comes up.
yeah.
And
Wi-
I that's just
it's just such a simple like meat
yes.
hook of a plot that just keeps you going. It's like that's all the information that you need to go with. It's pretty
Yeah.
much like the most realistic situation that you could find yourself in with the information that you're given. It's like a bunch of like strangers came into my town. It's night and they're ripping people apart, and I shot this guy in the chest, and he's still coming at me. I don't think this guy's on PCP. He's not wearing Kevlar. I don't know what's going on, and they're eating people's necks. These guys might be vampires. I got to avoid these guys until the sun comes up.
It did kind of yeah, cuz they don't I will say, other than the fact that they can be shot in the chest, they are they are fairly easy to kill. Like
Yeah, like,
they're
a couple of them get their
bullets,
head
or
just completely shot off with a
they
shotgun.
start just kind of using an axe and decapitating them. Which because that's it's like I'm like it becomes it's honestly it was like they're they are vampires, but you're able to kill them the way you would a zombie.
Yeah. Well, I think it's pretty much just like, what is like the surefire way we can kill these guys? We can take their head off. That works. Like I
Yeah.
think, well, they didn't decapitate like all of them because I
No, no,
remember there
no.
was the part where like Bo is like driving
The
that the
snowplow.
Trent. Yeah, it's like a. I think it was like something called like a trencher because it
Oh,
basically
okay.
had like this like rotating like blade in the front. He shoots one off that's like on his windshield. It falls midsection onto the chain and just rips in half. And it's like, that is the coolest scene
Yeah.
of just him kind of going on like this like one man like twisted metal rampage through the town. He's got like his like trunk full of like bear traps that a couple of the vampires hopping up there are tripping
Yeah.
on, and then they're getting dragged on the back. He's shooting them like he's getting headshots with a shotgun. He then drives into a bar with like a box of like dynamite and a couple of flares. It's like, he ain't gonna eat me, and then he just blows the whole thing up. Somehow
Yeah,
survives
there's
that,
no
and
way
then
he would
gets
have
curb
survived that.
stomped.
There's no way
It's
he would
like
have survived
it's
that.
like how that was a huge. It's like I can understand like the vampires surviving the explosion because like literally the three that were in there just jump out and are only kind of mildly inconvenienced that they're on fire.
Which
Like no rush whatsoever. Which is,
fire
yeah, that's terrifying.
kills vampires though. So,
I
yeah,
mean,
okay. I
if
mean,
you're on,
apparently
I mean, if you're on fire long enough, it'll kill like
I
anything
mean,
long
yes.
enough.
But okay, yeah.
But
I
yeah,
was
yeah, he gets curb stomped immediately. It's like, well, you got your wish. They didn't eat you, but is this any better?
so okay, that was my thing about the vampire. So other than the sun, like I felt like I was confused on what if they had any limitations, because so we see very quickly we learn that they're obviously they're pretty like they're very smart, um and
Yes.
they're very strong. Are they able to run? I can see they're fast, but are they able to run fast?
I mean, they don't need have like they don't really seem to have like a need for oxygen, so they don't really have any limitations
Because I
like
it,
physically or mentally. The only weakness that is like a guaranteed thing is their weakness to sunlight. Everything else is just kind of circumstantial, I
it's
guess.
because like there's a couple of scenes where so whenever they're in the attic, they're pretty much whispering because they're trying so hard to stay quiet so that the vampires won't and then they start to hear and realize that the vampires are going house to house looking for anybody, and they're then like, oh my god, we gotta move. And so then later when they move to a new location or they go to the store, they only go when it's snowing to kind of camouflage them a little bit. But and which I'm like, I feel like that would definitely help, but I'm like, can't what don't they have aren't they able to smell you? Aren't they able to hear you? I feel like there's just times where I'm like, I feel like they should have been discovered by the vampires. And I was like, how what like do they have a good sense of smell? Like, do they have good hearing? Because it seems like they'll whenever there were a couple times where they were like, I'll create a diversion, you guys get to the sheriff's station or whatever. And obviously it's very easy. They're just like Evan's just running down the street going, hey, hey, like just like it is any enemy, not necessarily a vampire, which has a from everything I've seen, they tend to have a really good hearing. So they would be able to hear them, aside from the yelling and the
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? Like I just feel like there are a lot of these things where I'm like, what is
No.
there? What can they
I,
not do?
I,
What can they do?
yeah. Like I totally get it, and that's kind of one of the scary things about this movie is that they don't tell you what the limitations or capabilities of these vampires
Fair
are. It's
point.
just
Therefore,
Yeah,
okay,
and
yep.
I feel like that, and I feel like that's kind of like the scariest thing about them is that they are a complete and utter mystery. They kind of just showed up, and then they're going to leave and make this whole thing look like an accident, making basically like the few remaining survivors seem like raving lunatics because there's only like 8 of them. No one's going to believe the testimony of 8 like potential like people who suffer from severe shock from losing literally everyone that they have ever
It is
known.
just so.
Like
Yeah,
no one, yeah, no one will believe them. Like they are forever going to be classified as like crazy lunatics or just be locked up in a mental asylum because they're taking their belief in fantasy creatures way too
it
far.
just was so kind of mind blowing how smart they were, because when it becomes clear, oh, they're gonna burn the town down, you think about like they have 30 days to just roam free, to hunt, to kill anyone. No one outside of the vicinity of the town will know. And then, you know, eventually they're going to have to leave, whether they, drink it dry, pun intended, and or no, they whether they kill everyone or they don't, because the sun is going to come up. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
They are
and
going to
and on
guarantee and
yeah
burn it down. So no matter what, everyone's going to
yeah.
die. And that's just like, and apparently though in the original comics, or I don't know, did it ever make it to the script? I know in the original comics there was like another vampire leader who realizes what they're going to do, and for the sake of keeping vampires a secret comes to the town to stop them.
So yeah, like another like elder vampire goes to like Barrow to confront Marlowe because hey, if you do this, you're going to expose like all of us. Like yeah, this is like a glorified like buffet, but I mean it is way too risky. We're destroying an entire town. We've spent centuries making the humans believe that we are nothing but like the figments of their imagination and that we're nothing but fictional like nightmare fuel. And I believe in the comics he kills Marlowe or Marlowe kills I can't someone dies
Yeah.
in the comic and I can't remember who kills who, but for the most part the outcome is more or less the same because I think they're still there until like Eben turns into a vampire and then like kills whoever is remaining and then the vampires basically fuck off after that. It's like, well, they killed our alpha. Let's go. We don't want to mess with that
Yeah.
guy.
Um but yeah, I mean, I appreciated that they were so smart, and they literally thought, it doesn't matter, no one's going to survive this, whether we actually physically
Yeah,
kill them or not. um
and I think that's kind of one of the reasons why I like this
yeah.
movie is because the villains are smart in
Yes.
this. Like they don't make anything that is like an overly calculated risk for no reason. Like everything they do is so methodically and meticulously planned out. Like you can tell that like everything they're doing it with a purpose. Like they're sweeping through the houses one by one, eventually clearing people out. They're using some of the
Oh
survivors
my
as bait to
god, can
try to
we
coax other
we
survivors
gotta talk about
out.
that scene. You finish first.
Yeah.
We gotta talk about that scene.
So yeah, so they take like some random girl in the town who Kirsten who like knows like pretty much like all the survivors that we see like they're still chilling in the attic, like they know exactly who that is. She's like walking through like the middle of the street going like help somebody help, like she's she's bloody, she's all cut up, she's not
I mean, at
in,
first
yeah, she's been
at
through the
first you
ringer.
kind of think, oh, maybe she doesn't really know what's going on. Like, her, screaming for help is obviously not going to help her, because they're going to just come find her. And they're like, we got to find a way to get her in here. And then Evan is like, wait, look at the roofs. There's vampires on the roofs. They're
Yeah, and
using her as bait to
yeah,
bring them. And I was like, they're so fucking smart. I love it.
yeah, and then eventually, like after like she like goes through the town, she like turns the corner and like a bunch of the vampires are there. It's like I tried. It's like I was like, and then like Marlo gets up to her and she's like, "Oh God, no, please, God, no, God help!" And then like Marlo gets like right in her face and goes, "God." And he looks up. He like looks in the sky. He looks like all around, and he goes like he gets like real close to her, and he whispers, "No, God." And it's like that is fucking terrifying. That is the scariest thing you could possibly hear from someone who is like 100% gonna murder you. And then like all the vampires circle her, and they're all just taking turns like swiping at her, and then eventually one just tackles her and eats her. It's like they played with their food before they finished her, and it was so like so much overkill for this one person,
Yeah.
but it just really went for like this is happening all over the town, and this is what's going to happen to everyone else. It's like this is it's terrifying because like this is what would happen if there
Yes.
were like
And
vampires.
it's
Like
it's also though
yeah,
it's also is kind of horrifying because when Evan makes the point saying we can't go out there, they're out there. There's too many of them. Like it's kind of that moment of for the safety of the town, they cannot go out to rescue her, and um like and kind of a oh my god they're gonna let her die kind of thing because they can't go. Wait, what was the next scene other than her being killed? Was it Evan watching?
um,
Doesn't Evan go out?
Evan goes out because like oh maybe I can try and like get her.
Yes.
And while that's happening, there's like an old man up in the attic who has like Alzheimer's, who's like, I'm gonna go to Wainwright. Like he like completely oblivious
Oh,
to
isn't
what's
that
going on,
after? That's
and
after.
that's
Yeah, yeah.
after. But I mean,
Yes.
it's
Oh
still
man. Yeah.
like it's still like heartbreaking.
And he tries to leave, and then he basically ends up escaping. He says, "Can I go to the bathroom?" And Stella's like, "Okay, but remember, don't flush." And I'm like, "Oh, I was wondering about that." um, and then you find out he literally just climbed out the window, and his son goes after him, and
And his son dies like immediately after
we don't
that.
see the old man die, but I mean he died.
No,
Um,
it's very
yeah.
implied that he is
Um,
not with us.
but I
Um,
think this might be a good time though to talk. So about I do so this movie has a score of I want to say like audiences gave it on Rotten Tomatoes. It was like a 56%, and like critics gave like a 51% or something. Um, and I feel
yeah,
like this is one of those movies when I kept looking it up. I kept seeing a lot of people. I was seeing comments on like YouTube. People were saying like this is really underrated. This movie, and I agree. I definitely think it's
yeah,
very
one hundred
underrated. I
percent.
think it was I like thoroughly enjoyed it. I think, but as I was watching, and this is definitely a movie I'm gonna watch again, and I'm gonna notice more things. But I will say, I think it
Yeah,
very much is a survival. I was looking at it as there were a lot of these things that I felt like weren't explored enough or maybe explained enough, and I ultimately realized it's a survival movie. The main task of the characters is just to survive the month.
yeah, like they're not going out of their way to like it's like oh we need to like learn their
Exactly.
weaknesses. We need to know how like they're just like I'm gonna hide in this attic for
Yes.
30 days. Like that's it. Like we're gonna go out and eventually get food. We're gonna try and find someplace that's a little bit more secure. But that's it. Like they're not
Yeah.
doing anything else that would like potentially like risk their safety. It's just all right. I'm gonna sleep now, and you take
Yeah.
watch.
It's
Sounds like a plan. All
yeah,
right. Night.
exactly. And so I feel like I was able to look past things for because yeah, you expect more scenes of like action scenes of them fighting the vampires. Learning their weakness or which they do. It's sun, but like it's yeah, they're just why were they going to put themselves in a situation a high risk situation like that? And so the only times they do is when like yeah, they go to the store where we get another I guess this was the scene that you were like
Yeah, this one I was like very hesitant to like sell this. Like, I felt like this scene was like, this is either going to sell you on it or it's going to completely
it
deter you
didn't
because So they go to a supermarket and they're like, okay, like you get like first aid stuff, like you get like batteries, you get like canned food, like you get water, like he splits everyone up to like go and do their tasks. And in the back of the store, they hear like some like slurping noise. It's like, huh, that sounds ominous and suspicious as fuck. Let's go and investigate. Even though the two people that go and investigate have no weapons on them whatsoever. And in fact, the only weapon that they have amongst, I think, at that point, the eight of them is a single fire axe. Like, okay, you guys need to stock up on some kind of weaponry. Um, and they see a little girl just kind of huddling over this guy who is just a complete bloody mess. Like, he's completely dead. And then she goes like, I'm done playing with this one. Do you want to play with me? And she just tackles like a couple of people and like tries to eat them. And then they eventually like overpower her because she's like a 7-year old little girl, pin her to the wall, and then Jake, the little brother, takes the fire axe and chops her head off. And you see that shit. You see the whole thing, the axe going right through her neck and penetrating that wall. It's like,
Yeah.
holy shit, yeah, it's like, all right, this is gonna be a hard sell to
See,
get you to watch this, Sam, but
is it weird that for some reason didn't I should have been more scared. That kind of stuff just doesn't phase me in movies. I don't know why.
okay, wow, okay, I thought that was gonna be more of a hard
I mean,
sell on you.
it's if it was like a non-vampire, then probably. But like it's yeah, like but I think okay, so this is the thing about that scene though, because I know that it's straight from the comics, and even the design and the costume and the pigtails with the like the ribbons, like that's straight from the comics. But at first I was just like, Is she a vampire with the vampires that came to town? Because I was like, is she a member of this town? It's the middle of November. Why would
No,
she be wearing a dress like this? Why would she have sleeves?
so
Like,
yeah, so yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. If you notice on her arm, she has uh tattoos on her arms that look not quite normal. Like, it looks like some kind of like writing that seems like either like really old or like some weird runes on her arms. Like, this isn't like a normal little girl. Like, this is a vampire that turned into a little girl a long time ago and has since stayed in that age.
oh,
Like, it like
okay.
you only see it for like a little bit, but like this little girl like clearly came with the group of vampires because like the group of survivors, like, they have no idea who this person is, but like apparently they don't notice the like very large like tattoos on this little girl's
And
arms.
it's during the scene that we get a product placement for Pepsi,
Pep
which I just thought was
Pepsi,
hilarious. Like,
Pepsi, decapitate the baby
apparently, I guess
vampires.
it was supposed to be was it like Pepsi Max was supposed to be the sponsor.
Yeah, Pepsi Max, and then they had to change it in post because they didn't want to be associated with a child killing
I mean,
scene.
fair enough, but also it is a vampire. But yes, like I just thought that was it was just hilarious because
Still,
I mean I'm like, okay, if it was just in the background, but there's like enough space between everyone that it's clear that they're trying to show that it's Pepsi's a product placement.
Pepsi.
Um, I mean, I don't know. That's
Yeah,
I hate shitty product placements. That was just in the background, so I'm like, oh, okay.
yeah. It wasn't
Get
like in your
you get
face.
Pepsi Max. Just like look straight at the camera. Um,
The Fresh Maker.
they
So
say to
I
the
think
vampires,
that,
"Are you thirsty? Try Pepsi." Um,
yeah,
so but okay, so I think that was my thing was I assumed I'm like, okay, I can assume that she's come with the vampires because it doesn't make sense why a kid who's living in this town who knows that like it's middle of winter, there's no way that they would just be wearing like a spring dress and not dress at all appropriately for the cold.
I like how that was your logic. It's like, she's wearing a dress with no sleeves. She's
No, but I was
clearly
just
a
like I
vampire.
no I
It's like
no, I
no
my
other
first thought was
evidence.
that she was just like a little girl in the town and they're all like, "Oh my god, like this is how it's like another level of how messed up this is that one of the vampires turned a a girl like in their town into this killing machine. But I think because because this is like again a survival movie, I feel like the characterization isn't as good as it could be. I mean, not because it's a survival movie, but like because it's solely about surviving, the characters don't like I felt like Ebsen sorry, Evan, not Ebsen. Evan, who's Ebsen? Who's
Yeah, it's
Ebsen?
like
I
who's
don't know. I
Ebsen?
think when they were saying Epsom salts is what the snow is. I don't know why. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Anyway,
Oh,
like
okay.
I felt like he didn't he was already like he was sheriff, he was already kind of leader of this town. He takes lead, him and Stella, but him like mainly are taking lead in this like survival attempt. Like I definitely
Yeah,
appreciate so we find at the very end he in order uh I guess let's jump to the end. Stella, they find this like little kid like covered in blood, like freaked, like so shocked that they're not even talking, and she, is it was it? I don't. It was just a kid. We don't even. I don't even know what like gender they were because they were wearing
yeah.
so much like a thick parka and
Clothes.
yeah,
So many layers
and
of parkas.
Evan is trying doesn't know where they are and is freaking out, and apparently they're hiding underneath a truck and they're starting to freeze to death, and then they see that the vampire is about to burn that town down, and even though they're in the like they're in like the what's it the power plant the like where are they hiding out?
Yeah, it's like yeah, it's like I forget what they call it, but it's essentially like a power plant. Like it's like this building isn't going to be like immediately like burned down if like if the vampires like burn the whole town down. Like they can most likely ride it out in this building until the
Yeah,
sun comes up if the vampires just don't go
yeah.
into that building.
But they
Um,
basically Evan realizes there's like if we go out there we're gonna die. If she runs they're gonna kill her. If she stays there she's gonna burn to death. And so the only thing he can do is to which I want to talk about the scene before this before we end, but he basically injects himself with blood, realizing because is it just like a
yes.
bite and you turn into a vampire?
Uh, yeah, I guess so. Like it's just it's kind of
A couple
unclear
of them this happens
because
to.
the guy that they so yeah they encounter like the sled dog guy who we only see get like scratched like a couple times when he's like trying to save
Yeah.
his wife, and she and that when we next see him, like he's basically like a vampire. And then the next time we see that happen, we see they they come across Billy, who loses his hand in like the muffin monster after pushing a vampire in, after that vampire like basically ripped his throat out, and he is like immediately turning into a vampire. So I guess it's any kind of contact as long as it's not immediately fatal. It's kind of unclear in this
So
movie.
blood
Yeah, yeah,
contact.
I guess so.
Evan basically takes
Billy's
Billy's
blood.
blood and injects himself with it and then turns into a vampire. He's like when I don't remember John Reese, that was the guy's name. When
Yeah,
John turned, he knew who I was. He was still a little bit like himself for a minute. So if I can stay myself long enough, I can save Stella and then goes out and saves her. And I think I appreciated that. I did not expect that to happen at all.
you didn't see him turning into
No,
a
no,
vampire.
but which is also why again, the opening scene of the movie, I thought it was Evan. He had survived the month. He was seeing the sunrise, and then the whole movie's in flashback. So I thought the very end of the movie, where Stella's holding him as he burns from the sun, was maybe them hiking up to that point where he was going to die. That's what I thought. That's why how at the
Yeah.
end of the movie how I thought that first scene was him. Anyway, regardless,
So yeah, then the final fight happens, and as I mentioned, like he kills Marlowe after getting like the shit
yeah.
kicked out of him, and the kind of hokey effects of like him punching through his mouth and out the back of his skull, and the other vampires are kind of like slowly kind of back off, and then they kind of just are never seen again. So I just assume they kind of like go back on their boat and sailed away to wherever it is they came from. Which,
So they were the ones
again,
on the boat.
yes, yes,
Okay.
they were the ones on like the huge like boat that the stranger came from, or
Okay.
implied with as the stranger came from, because
Yeah.
there's no way he rode from literally anywhere in like his little rinky-dink rowboat in Alaska
Yeah.
in presumably the winter time, if this is going by like real world like
Yeah.
events of this would happen.
But because so when Stella finds out though, realizes that he's a vampire and he's like, I just did like I did what I had to do. Like there was no other way to save her. And it was kind of obviously building up towards them maybe reconciling or whatever. But I felt like we never really got any real closure, or not really, I guess not closure, but really any information on why they were separated. I thought it felt very much like a full circle moment for his character. The problem is I don't know what that circle was. I don't know why how he didn't feel like he, other than becoming maybe even a better leader because of it, I didn't really feel like Evan changed all that much from the beginning. He still he was the protector and he stayed the protector until literally the very very end. And
Yes,
it just didn't feel like, because it was so much of a survival movie, not I gotta say, because like the thing about the survival movie and why I keep saying that is because it's very much focusing on them surviving. Great, but in this case, I felt like the characterization was not what it could be. Like Jake, for example, he's like you said, he's the one that beheads the vampire
the little
girl,
girl.
the little
Yeah,
girl, and he basically later he's like saying like, oh, he'll go do something, and Evan's like, you are you really you just decapitated this like little kid, are you ready to do that like 10 more times? No, he's not, because he's like 15 and a
he's
kid. He doesn't
he's still shaking from
like
doing it the
for
first time.
for him he could have like, and I get why he wouldn't want to do it again, but I just felt like there were all these, I don't want to say missed opportunities. I just felt like the characters didn't grow as much as they could have. And even like Billy, for example, we meet him in the beginning, you kind of he's like, oh, he's Evan's partner, he's his friend. And then the whole movie, I'm like, where the hell's Billy? And then we find him towards like in the
Like towards like
like the
the end of the
last like
movie.
30 minutes of the movie, he was hiding out in his house, and he like
Yeah,
lets
and
them know because of Morse code. And at first I'm like, is this a trap? Maybe he
well,
threw a trap. Yeah.
it wasn't Morse code. It was just him flashing a light.
Oh, I mean, I don't know. It was a light.
Yeah,
I
that
don't
was
know.
not Morse code.
I
But
don't
yeah,
know.
we find him, and this is probably the most heartbreaking scene in the whole
Oh,
movie.
okay.
He mercy killed his wife and two daughters, and said, "It's like I wanted to kill, and I tried killing myself too, but my goddamn gun jammed." Like, oh my god, that is like the end of like the Mist. It is so heartbreaking.
But so they weren't, and at first I thought they were like turned, like they were bitten, or they were like he killed
No,
them
no,
before they
he
became.
no, no. He said that he said he killed them before because he
Yeah,
didn't want that to happen. He mercy killed his family
and I just
and
think
tried to mercy kill himself.
there's no, and if, I mean, on some level, okay, but on the other hand, it's like there's not really a reason for that. It just seemed it is
I mean,
heartbreaking. No, I get his
it,
logic,
it yeah, like it makes 100% sense.
but like the
Like
fact
yeah,
that, I mean, I don't know, it just seemed so like we never also met his wife or daughters, and then Billy's
no, like
gone
they're
for
mentioned. Yeah, yeah, they're mentioned like a few times in the beginning, but yeah, we never see them.
most of the movie, and then we just find out he killed his family because he didn't like he was going to kill all of them in prevent, and it's like I don't know. I'm just that's just also makes me have more questions about his character. Like he didn't even want to. He was so utterly terrified. He didn't even want to attempt to fight or survive like Evan is. And you can see, okay, like they're opposites, whatever. But I but then he shows up and he's obviously very messed up by what happened, and then he sacrifices himself kind of, and as he's turning into a vampire, and I guess so he was starting to do that shriek that the vampires do, which I
Yeah,
really like
and
because that was so like, oh no, he's turning, and then Evan has to kill him, And I guess
Yep.
wasn't originally it wasn't clear that he was becoming a vampire. They had to add in the shrieking to make it clear.
Yeah, they had to make that there was some kind of like behind the scenes thing where it was like that scene almost didn't make it because it was like too intense for the censors because you see like half of his head just kind of like hang limp on his shoulder because the other half is just completely gone. Um, but yeah, it was a pretty intense scene. But I guess that kind of leads into our final point of the movie of Sam. Do you think this movie could happen?
Oh god, I was literally last night I was like I kept going back and forth. Um I kind of want to say yes because that's what makes it so good and so scary is because we just have these monsters. Forget the fact that they're vampires. Just these monsters
Yeah,
just destroying this town. They have no limitations and people are going to do whatever they can to possibly survive. They're not going to put themselves in harm's way. They're not going to go out of their way to play hero a bunch just to, like because they want to survive as well. Um I want to say yes, it would happen. And I think the rules of how this all works, um, they're present enough that I'm like, okay. I think I was starting to like when Evan injects himself with the blood. At first, I'm kind of like, oh, he's injecting himself. Maybe it's gonna like just pass out of his system in a little bit, but no. So I think he just becomes full vampire. So I think that just was like some of the rules of like how you become infected or like like I had some questions, but for the most part, I think I want to say yes. I think this could happen, or it would play out this way.
yeah, I would have to agree with you because that is like the whole premise of this movie is that
What if?
what if vampires attacked in a situation where they essentially can't die? Like this entire like environment and situation effectively makes them an unstoppable force, and there's no immovable. There's nothing that can stop them. Essentially, there's nothing that um the people of Barrow like they don't have like any uh prior knowledge that vampires are even real because this is in essentially the real world. This is in modern day 2007, our reality. If we like from an outsider's view and perspective, if we heard on like the news tomorrow that some town in Alaska was completely wiped out, there were no survivors, there were like potential reports of like cannibalism or violent outbursts of murder from like some kind of like survivors or eyewitness events, um, we wouldn't know the full story of that, and that would essentially be what an outsider would have heard from uh, after the events of this movie, just like randomly on the news, and it would have been the exact same thing that we would have heard if like what I just said. It's just kind of scary that this movie is probably as realistic as it can get with all these fantasy elements thrown in.
But also,
But
yeah, yeah, I
yeah,
agree. Taking away the fantasy and the supernatural stuff, you just have these like insane, monstrous animals just running amok. And I like I think something else. The thing about it was that they're not there. It's not necessarily other than like okay, they're using somebody as bait to try to lure them out. They're they're doing certain things to get these people to come out, but for the most part, it's not a game of cat and mouse. It's just, I mean, I guess it is, but it's not a game to
yeah,
them. They're just there to feed. That is it, and they're not trying to play some let's play some fun game, which I feel like we've all seen in vampire s situations. It's just like they're there to drink blood and to feed, and that is it. And when they're done, they're gonna burn the house down, or burn the place down. Like it's so simple, and that's why it works, and that's why it holds up too.
Yeah, like if you haven't seen this movie, go and give it a watch. I wouldn't really recommend the sequel from what I remember. I they did make a direct to DVD sequel based off like the second like series in it. It was it's called Dark Days, and it's basically just follows Stella after the events of the first one,
Wasn't it like
kind of
straight to
going around the
video or
country,
something?
like straight to video. Yeah. Yeah, she's just going around telling everyone, just like, hey, this is what happened. Everyone thinks I'm crazy, but I'm going to prove it to you. I came here earlier and set up UV lights in this stadium, and I know the vampires have been tracking me down to try and like silence me. She turns on the lights, and a couple people in the audience just burn to death, and is like, "What the fuck's going on?" And then the movie kind of takes off from there.
It's just like I thoroughly, yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
You 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 were not expecting to like this movie as much as you
No,
did,
I
were
went
you?
into it really nervous, but I no, I had like a ton of fun watching. And I mean, it's not like it. It's oddly enough, it is a fun movie. Like, which sounds super weird to say, but like,
No, it is. I agree with you.
yeah, there just heads up. There is a lot of decapitation. There is
Decapitation.
a lot of
Yeah,
like really gory. There are a lot of gory things, and I think for me, gore is just it's hit or miss. Sometimes it just totally catches me off guard, and sometimes it doesn't affect me. But it is pretty shocking. Um, but like it's it's just a very it's a really great premise, and there was so much effort that went into it.
yeah.
I do think, like, obviously there were some issues with some of the characters, but like I don't really know how they could have remedied that
It
necessarily.
didn't really like make or break the movie because for the most
No,
part, it
no.
this is Evan and Stella's story, so that's why they're the main focus.
Hmm. It just
Yeah,
seemed very the fact that they are the main focus. We just don't get enough. We don't really get any information other than they're strange, and that's about it. And then it's just kind of annoying. It's like I want to. I mean, I more care more about are you guys going to survive the month, but I also care about like you know, I'm curious. You guys keep mentioning some of these things. So why did you guys split up? Why are you on the path to divorce? What is going on? And they're civil enough that clearly it wasn't some horrible like one cheated or one had their heart horribly ripped
yeah.
out. It was just like
It was definitely played up for
it's very
drama, and it
mundane and it never
and
was
it
fine.
yeah, and it kind of worked to so we can kind of see like their relationship kind of blossom a bit.
But I
And
feel like
yeah,
other than the trauma that they're gonna have, or that Stella's gonna have after all this, I just definitely didn't feel like the characters changed all that much from beginning to end. I think the
I
character
can
that changed the most was Bo.
I was gonna say Jake.
Really, I feel like Jake was on the path to, but we didn't like it. Just I don't know. I guess a little bit. Not really though. I feel like Bo was the one that changed the most because
Yeah,
in the very sorry one of the first scenes we meet him in, Eben cites him because his truck's leaking, and Billy's like, why do you bother citing him? And he's like, because he lives all alone at the edge of town. Giving him a citation makes him feel like he's a part of this town. Like he basically it's his own weird way of making it clear like you're a member of this town too, even though you seem disconnected. And then
yeah.
he sacrifices himself for this town and like does what he can to protect this town. And Evan kind of does the same thing, but that seems like something he would have done. So I just really felt like out of everybody, to me, Bo's the one that had more of an arc um,
No, that
than
makes
Evan.
sense.
Yeah, but Jake was on the path too, but it just didn't. I feel like it didn't really pan out.
Yeah, that makes sense. I totally forgot what I was gonna say.
Jake,
No, no. Technically, I think if we're talking about change, Stella is the one that has the most change, especially between the first one and the second one, because not only does her like motivations change from like oh, I'm going to survive, to I'm going to hunt down every vampire and make them pay, and some like crazy revenge story. But they completely changed actresses, so she had the most change.
She also, though, at the very end, when the vampires leave after he's killed Marlowe, he's like, "Should I go after them?" And she's like, "No." And it's like, "Yeah, why bother? Like they're leaving. That's all they really wanted." Like, I mean, I guess he could have, but like he nearly died. Get killing the main one. Like they've made it past the month, and that was really the goal. So,
Yeah,
like, it just yeah, it doesn't. It makes it seems weird that yeah, she like wants to hunt down every vampire. It's like you could have killed a bunch right then, and you didn't. So
yeah.
I changed my
Um,
mind.
so yeah, that was 30 Days a Night. I definitely would recommend this movie. It is a very fun horror movie, perfect for Halloween. It's very haunting and cold atmosphere, just makes it seem very welcome for a very cool autumn night to watch and just cuddle up and get ready for a decent scare.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't have. I will say this movie's more of like you kind of have a sense of where the scares are going to be. It's not like jump scary. I feel like it's more of gore scary.
Yeah, and even then the gore is like very lax.
And it holds up though too. Like it
Oh yeah,
doesn't
no,
look
like
yeah.
no, I'm not saying like the
No, no,
gore
no,
is
no.
like
I know. Yeah,
bad.
no,
Yeah,
yeah. Like, but it holds up, but it's not like yeah, like it looks good, and it's not like I don't know. It's not unreasonable for how that person died.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that being said, I think that pretty much covers this entire movie. Do you got anything else to add, Sam?
Uh, like, subscribe, follow us. Pretty much wherever you can find podcasts. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and yeah, we're almost done with October. Isn't that wild?
It really is.
Like we're almost. I mean, like it was occurring to me like, oh my god, we have like one more left for the month.
Yes, and I actually really like the next one that we're doing, both the original and the remake. But for the sake of the month, we're only going to be talking about the original. We'll save the remake for another time. Although I think the remake you'll find it very funny. So with that being said, yeah, like, comment, subscribe, follow us on literally everywhere you can find a
Yeah.
podcast. And in the meantime, I'm Kevin Tracy.
And I'm Samantha Tomlinson, and I don't know what I was gonna say. I almost went yay vampires, and then I'm like, oh, that's
Yay, vampires! Sure, that's our closing now. Yay, vampires! Good night, everybody.